No, no buzz. Just Bees Book Club. Sowing Seeds in the Desert by Masanobu Fukuoka. Um, I have read one book by Fukuoka before this. It's the One Straw Revolution. It's quite good. That it very much makes me not want to recommend this one nearly as much as to say like you should read One Straw Revolution. Fukuoka is a farmer who's oh shit, what is it specifically called? It's specifically called something like no work or uh, no labor. I think it's no work agriculture. He was a person who went through sort of uh, a brief career as a biologist in Japan in the 40s, who then went back to sort of a family farm and developed a specific style of farming, which he calls natural farming, which he, in this book especially, very much distinguishes from organic farming. Um, and the like very high level of it is that he does not want to do work. He does not want to uh, do any unnecessary work, and he thinks this is the best way to uh, build out farms. Period. Not small farms, not family farms, farms in general. Um, his process, as I understand it, is basically like uh, figure out the local specifics of what's there, what has been done to what is there, and then basically like grow a ground cover that nourishes plants, and then um, make clay pellets out of the seeds that you would like to grow or that could grow or just anything really, uh, and sow them by throwing them on the ground. You make the clay pellets specifically because that if you coat seeds in clay, they're much less likely to be eaten or run off with by birds, rats, whatever your local fauna is. Um, this became the seed bomb idea. Like he's the originator of the seed bomb, if that's a thing that you know about. Um, Kinda is the answer. If you're a bee, you're kind of familiar with the seed pellet. You've never been in any particular anarchist space where they're actually seed bombing, but you've heard about them a lot. Um, and also a thing that's in this book is very useful, which is he did not invent this. This is in a footnote, I believe, but that had been a practice in farming for a long time that was sort of lost, and then he sort of rediscovered. Um, it's also called One Straw Revolution, the earlier book, because the earlier book came out in the 70s. This came out in the late 90s or mid 90s, early 90s. I think 92 is my memory. Um, and it was like updated, but he Fukuoka passed in the early 2010s, I think. Um, and there's some updated things, but the the seed bombing thing came up in a footnote from the translator editor person. I don't know. I don't remember which. Um, this is a book about how to revegetate the desert. Um, and the very high level argument that Fukuoka is making is uh, what you do is aerial seed bombing with a billion different plants. With not of all spectrums, with things that are edible, with things that are distinctly not, with trees that are that produce edible fruits, trees that do not. Like Just throw everything down, whatever grows, grows, and then you um, follow up from there. But specifically, not in a way that makes it more useful for people. Specifically, the way that uh, is taught to you by the land. Um, I think it's very cool. I have no, useful thoughts in terms of like being an agriculturalist, being somebody who's ever grown anything. I've never grown anything. Um, Utility, land management, all that stuff is completely beyond me. Um, I think he makes a really compelling argument that the thing you should do is sow seeds and follow up on what happens without becoming the person who is maintaining the land, because that's actually the wrong approach. It's you don't maintain it, you sort of fix the damage that was done earlier. So the background to what he's talking about is that um, he's specifically making the argument, I guess, is a more palatable way to say this, that most desertification of the world is uh, what we now call anthropocentric, is because of the way that humans are such a dominant species that they have changed the geological time, um, in the same way that, like, there were periods that were dominated by certain kinds of dinosaurs or certain kinds of other geologic, not dinosaurs is a bad example, uh, geologic phenomena. Um, he does not use anthropocentric here, I think, ever. Um, but he does a very good job of saying basically like humans are the cause of most deserts through obvious things like logging, like fossil fuels, but also through just general spread, and I don't think this ever becomes sort of like a Malthusian thing. I don't think I'm fairly confident that it never becomes a you know we are overpopulated. There's just too many of us because um, that's a fascist argument. Is what that um, voice and gesture. It is just a fascist argument at this point. Um, he instead is very clear about like we need to fix the things that are problems that we have caused. We also are not the fix for things. The fix is let let things happen, and I keep wanting to say steward them, but that's like exactly the opposite of what he's actually saying. I think if you take his argument seriously and at face value, he would rather people not be stewards, which is really good. I think that's a really good and useful thing. Um, it's yeah. This book in particular, just to get back to specifics rather than trying to do high level summaries, I guess. Um, a lot of it, like the first two-thirds, are more about Fukuoka and his the way he came to his ideas. It's also there's like uh, weird name drops of like uh, a person whose never a name I've never even thought to say out loud. Last name is Capra. I believe first name is like Fritjof or Fritjof. Um, the person who wrote the Tao of Physics. Like, there's a weird little interlude where Foucault is talking about having a conversation with Capra and being like, ask me some questions, and I learned about the problem that Capra was trying to solve by hearing Capra talk about the questions because I was just learning these words. But and also just like explicitly being like, I don't. This is not. I think we're actually on opposite sides of this issue. There's a lot of there's a not a lot of, but there's a couple of very weird little moments where like uh, Fukuoka talks about being in um, at a university in, I believe it's not at Santa Cruz because that was the one I went to. Um, I think it's in Portland somewhere or in the Pacific Northwest where he like gives a talk and he's like building up this interaction that is like he had talked with this professor of philosophy earlier, and this professor of philosophy stands up after the talk he gives, and he's like ready for this professor to like challenge him, but in fact the professor says like, we talked yesterday, and Fukuoka was very compelling and had no missed arguments about uh, the history of philosophy, specifically, the way that Descartes becomes the sort of foundation of science, and I'm changing my entire trajectory. That I'm like, this is probably how you experience this. Um, this is a way to tell a story that is probably very effective, I guess. This is a story that seems like a story that someone told. Uh, um, uh, so there's like a lot of different. I'm trying to sort of say there's a lot of different like specific moments throughout this book where Fukuoka is like telling stories or talking about his own philosophy or talking about his own particular or his own history and how that led him to certain understandings that are cool, and a lot of them end up being not these ones that I just mentioned, but like a lot of them end up being sort of very similar to stuff he talks about in One Straw Evolution, which is great. It's fun to see somebody's sort of self mythologizing develop over time, especially when they're doing a thing that is cool and not some bullshit. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think like I think the thing I just want to say is like I had never thought before reading anything by Fukuoka that I would ever read a nihilist farmer. He's a nihilist farmer and it fucking rules. It's like it gives me hope, you know? This is dumb. uh, um, but yeah, so the sort of thesis of this book is um, the aerial seeding of the desert through clay pellets, and I don't know that I buy it necessarily. I don't know that it's like a thing that I'm like, I gotta go tomorrow and start figuring this out. But it's very compelling. Also, it's cool. It's a cool thing to read. I think that's where I'm landing here. I didn't really come into this with like a knowledge of what I was gonna say or anything like that. But I think it's pretty cool. I do think One Straw Revolution is just a better read in general because it's a lot more uh, solid of a mixture of here is how I came to my conclusions, or here's my general personal philosophy, and here is what I'm specifically doing. Um, this reads in some ways more like a policy document, which is wild, like a nihilist policy document. Which, when I say that out loud, I'm like, this is way better of a book. Who wouldn't want that? Um, but there is also a bit in here just to sort of close this off, um, where I think it's actually in the conversation with Capra, or maybe it's a different conversation with a different specific person. It's been like a week or so since I read this. Um, that and I have a fucking terrible memory. Where he talks with another author about the 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 sort of efficacy of communicating, and he does not think it's very effective. The other author says, like, you've written multiple books at this point. You clearly think they can change things, and he says, no, 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 no. I don't think books can change a goddamn thing. I think doing the work in the world can change a thing. It can change your local environment or whatever. But I just wrote these books because it was a thing to do. It was just a thing to do. And um, as a person who loves books, like, very deeply, like, loves language like more than most things, um, who who would rather sit with a particular sentence than do almost anything other than build community when I'm capable of doing it. I found that moment like really incredible because I also love language, and I love language, and I also don't love, this is going slightly astray, but for a very specific reason that I think is clear. Um, when you read a book, when you read a novel, and the ultimate, like, sort of like the big statement the novel is making is that how important it is that we tell stories always feels deeply annoying to me. Like, just deeply, like, shut the fuck up. You're a novelist. Like, what are you talking about? Like, of course you believe this. Of course you believe this. This is the thing that makes your material conditions possible. This is the thing that allows you to make money. Of course you believe that telling stories changes the world. And it doesn't stop at novelists, of course. Everyone who's in the industry of building uh, books, hi, uh, sort of has to necessarily believe on some level that books matter. Um, I don't. Anyway, um, that dog's really going off. Thank you for not watching.